Welcome to Functional Philosophy. I'm Charles Tew, that's T as in tango, E as in echo, and W as in whiskey. This is episode number 15, and its title is Obsessive-Compulsive Disorder, or OCD. What causes it, and how to cure it. Let's start with a definition. What is obsessive-compulsive disorder? It's a psychological disorder in which one experiences the urge to perform or repeat impractical rituals as ends in themselves. This is my definition. OCD is the psychological disorder in which one experiences the urge to perform or repeat impractical rituals as ends in themselves. What are some examples? Flipping a light switch on and off 5 times instead of just once. Compulsively. Opening and closing a door numerous times. Thinking about your itinerary or your schedule for the day over and over, rehashing it in your head. It doesn't have to be a physical action, it can be a thought. That's the obsessive part. Obsession is supposed to refer to thoughts, and compulsions are supposed to refer to actions. So it's obsessive-compulsive disorder. It's repetitive thoughts, repetitive actions. Now, where does this come from? Why do people do this? Well, first, I want to throw out right away the idea that this is some genetic thing or just some physical ailment that can't be dealt with. No, this is a psychological problem that comes from thinking a certain way. Now, what is that way of thinking? Well, OCD is really nothing other than the full psychological manifestation of skepticism. Plus intrinsicism. Why skepticism? Well, skepticism is belief in the principle that one can't really ever know anything. How does this relate to OCD? Well, when you flip the light switch on and off a few times, why do you do that? Well, a lot of people say it's so nothing bad will happen, or so that they can be certain that the light has really been flipped off. Or, for instance, checking that your door is locked. People will come back over and over again to check that their door is locked. Why? Because they have to be certain that it is. Well, if they remember locking it, why do they have to come back and do it again? Well, they say they don't really have to, but better safe than sorry. It couldn't hurt. Now, this is Pascal's wager. This is the precautionary principle. This is skepticism. This is the idea that, yeah, it may be arbitrary to take these actions or to think that they're necessary, but it doesn't hurt anything to go back and check my lock 10 times to make sure it's locked. But it does hurt something. If you start acting, if you take one action on the basis of the arbitrary, if you take one action for no other reason than that it occurred to you, you have opened the door. There is no end to that kind of action, because whenever anything occurs to you then, you have endorsed the principle, embraced the principle of acting on something because it occurred to you. You have to have an objective line. This is why embracing the arbitrary is disastrous. Because if you don't have an objective line, you're simply opening yourself up to the flood. And that's all OCD is. It's the embrace of, well, better safe than sorry. Well, yeah, I know there's no reason to think I didn't lock my door because I do it every day, but I have to go check anyway, because what if I didn't? What do you mean, what if you didn't? Do you have any evidence? No, but better safe than sorry. Okay, well, if you're acting without evidence, you're being a skeptic. Now, maybe that sounds confusing, but you're simply saying, well, I can't know. How do I know that just because the sun has always risen? Well, I'm a skeptic. I don't know it's going to rise tomorrow. I have no reason to think it's necessarily going to rise tomorrow. Everything changes from moment to moment. We live in this Heraclitean flux. Who can say what's going to happen next? Well, if that's what you believe, you are going to feel compelled to check everything at every moment. And you're never going to be secure. You're never going to feel safe. And that's what OCD is. So you flip those light switches. Why? Because you need a constant refresh, because you can never be certain, because the world is unstable. That's why it becomes obsessive. It's obsessive. It's not a one-time thing because, there's a metaphysical and an epistemological component. The metaphysical component is, you've dropped a rock 1,000 times and it's fallen every time, but maybe the next time it'll just float in midair. It's a skepticism about identity as such. If you think anything can be anything in the next moment, if you follow Hume on that, or consistent skepticism, then you can never be certain about anything. This is why you have to obsessively and compulsively take these actions, because every moment requires a refresh, because every moment is different. Now, the epistemological corollary of this is an embrace of the arbitrary. Because since you can never know what's coming next, because anything could, by the nature of reality, come next, embracing the arbitrary is justified. Doing something just because it occurred to you is justified, because anything could happen. So, the truth is that really you have to check everything all the time. So anything that occurs to you is just one thing you have to check, because it could be anything. Maybe flipping the light switch 6 times is what you should do. But you can't do everything all the time, so you just do what occurs to you. Now, what's important is, why do certain things occur to you rather than other things? This is where intrinsicism comes in. You see, the other motivation for this is the desire to control your world, the desire to achieve values in a world that is in flux. So if you believe that the world is constantly changing, and that it's undealable with, you can't grapple with this constant flux, then you think, okay, I can't deal with this. I have values, I'm a living being, I have to achieve something. But I can't. I can't deal with the instability of the world. Say you want to write a book, and you think, well, but I have to rely on my subconscious to feed me the words, and then maybe people won't even like the book, maybe I won't be able to get it published, maybe it won't sell, maybe it'll be garbage anyway when I write it, maybe I'll get in a car wreck today and I'll never be able to finish it. The world is just too chaotic to achieve long-term values. So, one way of coping with that is to do 2 things. Shrink the range of your goals. So you do something like flipping light switches, or performing strange rituals compulsively. They're short, easy to do, you can definitely do them. They're short range. 2, you make them independent of yourself. This is where intrinsicism comes in. These things are valuable apart from whatever happens. So you flip that light switch. It's an end in itself. It's a ritual that is an end in itself. You achieved your goal. It doesn't matter what happens to you now. You got this satisfaction because you took this action, and that's all that matters. No matter what else happens in this changing world that you can't be sure of, you took this action, you got that value for all time. You will have flipped those light switches 5 times. So it's this placing of value in this external act that has nothing to do with practicality. It's not that the light switches, even in this regard, you're not even doing it because you have to be sure that the light's turned off, or you check the door a million times to make sure it's locked. You're not even doing it to make sure it's locked. You're doing it so that you feel you've done it. The repetition gives you this feeling of, I did this, it's done, and now it doesn't matter what happens. I mean, it's an irrational, corrupt, twisted way of trying to secure values in an insecure world. A similar thing happens with thoughts. So, something I used to do, because I used to have crippling obsessive-compulsive disorder, something I used to do was, I would be in school, math class, and I could not focus or pay attention to what the teacher was saying unless I had carved in stone in my mind my schedule for what I was going to do when I got home from school. I had to have it nailed down and know exactly what I was going to do. Why? Why did I have to do that? Because the schedule itself, the abstraction, the plan, was more important than anything else. It's this Platonic idea. I have to have the forms there. I have to have the unchanging, stable world of ideas set in stone. Or I have to have this affinity, this connection with this unchanging world of ideas, of forms. Then, when I have that stability, what happens in reality doesn't matter so much. But I have to have this absolute, out of context, intrinsic aspect of my life. So that's what OCD is. It's a desire to gain stability in a world that one perceives as being so unstable as to be undealable with. Now, the skepticism comes into play because the skepticism is what makes one believe that the world is undealable with. Because the more skeptical you are, the less you believe you can predict. And if you are the ultimate skeptic, which means you doubt the law of identity, and you go with Hume, then anything can happen at any moment. And so you shrink even further, and you have to have these little rituals that give you control and absolute intrinsic values. So, how do you solve this? Well, you have to stop being a skeptic and stop being an intrinsicist. This is why... Oh, something else I should say here. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychologist. I don't know if there's some dumb law or regulation where I can get in trouble for giving you this advice if I don't tell you that I don't have the official credentials of the establishment, but I don't have them, so don't take anything I say seriously. Who can ever know anything? That's what they want me to tell you. Okay, now that we have that idiotic garbage out of the way. I mean, as I've said before, psychology is currently a it's worthless. So, but no, I don't have the official credentials. So you're just going to have to go off the fact that what I'm saying is true, rather than the fact that somebody told you you can trust me, that some authority told you you can trust me. Okay, now where was I? Oh, how to fix it. Yes, this is the value of philosophy. As I said in my first episode, philosophy can cure psychological problems. If you get a philosophy, and a true one, you are adopting a new way of thinking. And so many of your problems come from thinking about the world and evaluating the world in the wrong way. So if you totally uproot that and replace it with something true and good, your psychological problems will vanish. So the number one thing you can do to fix psychological problems that most people have is get a proper philosophy. Gain the philosophical foundations that enable happiness. So, the first thing you need to understand with regard to OCD is that skepticism is false. So throw that out. You have to understand that you can predict what's coming, and so you don't need anything to make up for your inability to predict the future. You can predict the future. Things are what they are. You don't have to worry that this time when you let go of the rock, it's going to float in midair. Once you understand that A is A, and that you can predict things, that the inductive method works, the scientific method works, that isolating variables to establish certainty works, that's the foundation of the problem gone. Now you won't need to perform these rituals to give you stability in an unstable world. So, A is A. Things are what they are. Once you understand that that is a self-evident fact that applies to everything, there's the first block. That's the foundational problem gone. Now you might have further concerns. But what about establishing more abstract truths? What about the scientific method or the inductive method? Isolating variables so that you can achieve certainty. Principles. Well, those are all bigger issues than I can address in just this one podcast episode. But the way you can figure those things out is start by reading Ayn Rand. Then you can go further and read all of the additional material by other objectivists on induction and the scientific method. So it's going to take a while, but it will get better. If you have this problem and you want to understand why you can be certain about the world, that's what you should do. Start with Ayn Rand and read until you've convinced yourself. Now, once you understand that the world isn't this chaotic flux, you will naturally start to see your compulsions and your obsessions fall away, because you'll have more confidence in your long-range goals in the real world, and you will feel less of a need for a substitute. However, it will also be helpful to understand the true nature of values here. Values are objective. There is no such thing as an intrinsic value, so it's a mistake to even try to substitute your values with intrinsic values. Something is good to you for a particular reason. It's good to make sure your door is locked because it's good to you not to have your home ransacked and your things stolen. But what people with OCD do is they turn locking the door itself into a value in itself. An intrinsic value apart from what happens. Just having the door locked is an end in itself. Because who knows what else will happen. But this, if I can just do this, I'll feel good and satisfied, at least for the moment, until the next thing occurs to me. The next obsession pops up. You simply have to understand that having the door locked is not an end in itself. It's only a value if it serves your life in some way. So you have to get out of this idea that something can be good apart from its relation to you. It can't be. And the attempt to substitute intrinsic goods because you despair of ever achieving actual goods, objective goods, is a mistake. Don't even try that strategy. Instead, recognize that you can achieve objective goods, long-term values. You can do that because you can predict the future, because you can know reality. You can grasp principles. You can know what's coming. You can act long-term, and you can succeed. You don't have to forget about why you're locking the door, because who can ever know what's coming in the future, and just turn to, well, locking the door itself gives me satisfaction. No, you don't have to do that. It's a mistake. Don't indulge it. So the proper antidote to this element of the problem is simply to understand that nothing is good unless it's good for someone. Things are only good in relation to organisms. And the good you should be concerned with is what is good for you. So whenever you find yourself compulsively doing something, stop and think, is this really good for me? Or am I trying to displace what's good for me by focusing instead on something I know I can do? Am I trying to cut myself out of the equation because I'm afraid of what's going to come in the future? I'm afraid that I'm temporary and fallible and I won't be able to achieve what I want, so I want to take it all outside of me so that what happens to me doesn't matter. Well, you simply have to recognize that what happens outside of you, insofar as it doesn't relate to you, doesn't matter. So, start thinking about good as something that relates to you, because that's what it is. And start understanding that you can predict the future and achieve that good. Yes, it will take time. Yes, there's such a thing as setbacks and failing. But you have every right to expect success if you do the best you can. If you are mentally competent enough to listen to the words I'm speaking now, you are mentally competent enough to succeed in this world. And yeah, things change, but there are principles. You can understand trends. You can understand the ranges within which things work. That's what a principle is. You can understand that honesty is the best policy, or that practice will make you better, or that if you take a certain strategy of marketing yourself, it will work eventually, even if it isn't working now. So, start thinking of the world as a knowable realm of entities that are what they are. Start thinking of the good as something in relation to you, and don't give in to the arbitrary. Demand of yourself that you have a reason for doing something. Don't think, well, it just occurred to me that I might have left my door unlocked, so I have to worry about it and be anxious. No, when you have that anxiety, and it may occur to you, this isn't something you can directly stop. Your subconscious feeds you thoughts based on how you've thought before. But the way you stop that is, whenever your subconscious sends you that, think, okay, what is the evidence here? Is there any reason to think that I didn't lock my door? If I usually do it, I don't remember anything different happening today, okay. So I can be confident, based on the evidence, that I did lock my door. And that's all I can go on. All I can go on is the evidence. And if I don't have evidence, it's irrational to indulge this arbitrary whim. If you do that enough, eventually those thoughts will stop coming to you. If you indulge them, and if you indulge arbitrary action on the basis of the so-called precautionary principle, you are only going to exacerbate and maintain your obsessive-compulsive disorder. So the key is to get an objective perspective on the world and values. Change your thoughts to be objective. Change your actions to be in accordance with your objective perspective on the world and values. If you start making a habit of thinking and acting on the basis of an objective worldview, your OCD will go away. Alright, a couple of addendums. First, I was listening to my episode on banking the other day, and I noticed that I formulated Say's law the Keynesian way, That is an invalid formulation. It's just what my subconscious sent me up. It's not accurate. Look it up. Don't take the way I said it as the actual law. It's a misinterpretation of what he said and implies something false. So look up Say's law if you want to be clear on it. I just wanted to address that so I wasn't guilty of spreading economic misinformation. Second, somebody left a comment on the YouTube version of my last episode on why God does not exist. And I thought it was interesting. He raised a point that I had considered bringing up, or realized that perhaps I should have brought up after I listened to the episode. And then this guy brought up the point, so perhaps I should have. However, I wanted that episode to be short. There's a lot more I could say on God, but it's valuable to have an abridged version. So that's what that is. But anyway, I'll probably do a longer version in the future, dealing with all the questions of God. But for now, I want to answer this main concern. So I'll read you his comment, and then I'll read you my answer, because I don't think I can do better extemporaneously than what I wrote in reply to him. So here's what he said. Quote, I think what the law of identity is meant to convey is that A is A at a time t, and at time t, A cannot help but be A. But this is not to say that at time t1, A must be A. Even if there is a sudden jump of water to wine from t to t1, this jump does not violate the law of non-contradiction, because A is A at time t and B is B at time t1. So even though there is a change from one liquid to the next without a process, no logical law is violated, because at both times the substance is equal to what it is at the respective times. Unquote. My answer. Quote, the argument you're making is an argument against Parmenides. He believed that change was inherently contradictory, and so it couldn't exist. I agree with Aristotle, however, who answered that there's nothing contradictory about change so long as you specify a spatio-temporal context. At any given time, at any given place, a thing is what it is. That doesn't mean it can't be something else in the next moment or place. That's the point you were making, and it's true, but it doesn't leave a gap for miracles or any being who can perform them. The process of turning iron into steel is based on the identity of iron. The process is not something separate from the thing undergoing it. The cause and effect process of transforming the iron is simply an instance of the law of identity applied to action. You can't turn iron into steel or water into wine through just any old means. You have to go through a specific process. Why? Because of the nature of iron and water. Things change. It's a mistake to reify change, action, or cause and effect, as if those processes exist apart from the specific things that change or act. So there's nothing in the law of identity that says things can't change, but the requirements and form of change itself are dictated by the identity of the entity that changes. There is no generic change, just as there's no generic table or generic anything else. There is no exemption from the law of identity. Unquote. And I think that is unanswerable. Thanks for listening. If you have any questions about today's episode, just send me an email at charles.a.2@gmail.com. You can also check out my website. There you can find information on and links to everything I do, including ways to support it. I am probably going to start doing more on my YouTube channel than I have been. I throw these podcasts up there just with a still image. But I may start doing some actual videos. So keep an eye on that. You can find links to everything on my website. I have some essays that will go up soon. So for now, there are 4 things you can look forward to from me regularly. 1 is this podcast every Monday, and it will deal with some philosophical issue or the application of some philosophical principle, or it will involve an interview with somebody interesting. The second thing is my theme analyses, and you can find those as text on my website or video on YouTube. The third will be the other videos I do, which will be looser, more off the cuff, more transitory content, reactions to political events or other videos. And the fourth are my essays, which you can find on my website, and that is the most important and refined of my content. So if you want to see serious, original ideas, that's where you can find them. That's what I regard as my most important work, and some of those essays will be expanded and revised for courses or books, as sections of courses or books. That's it for this week's episode. Let's meet again in episode 16.